Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. And keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as, investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are on Sunday, April 21st. We're going to take a look at GOEV today. So in addition to the Weeble chart here and the Think or Swim chart, which we'll look at over here, I did pull in some data. It is quite interesting. So the short float percentage per Fintel is currently at 18.43%. This data is always a little bit old. Days to cover, just at a day and a half, so pretty quick in and out. But from iBorrowDesk, the fee that they currently have listed is 251.5% to borrow, with just 7,000 available shares, again, per iBorrowDesk, which I think is their feed from Interactive Brokers. So let's talk short squeeze for a second. I'm not saying it's going to happen, I'm not saying it's possible, but here are the components that I look at. Short float of the percentage, at least in the, into the double digits. So no 9s or 8s or 7%, but at least 10. So we're, in there at 18. Days to cover, they're in and out quickly because of the second important component, which is the fee. The fee is very high. That's getting up there for sure when these short sellers are paying incredibly high fee to borrow these shares. They need to get in and out relatively quickly in order to not incur tremendous fees, especially if the stock price starts to go against them. So we have the float being high enough, in my opinion, the fee being high enough, in my opinion. Now, the third component for sure is the price has to be going against them. We see a little bits of that recently, right? We see the rise from our 220 level here up, trying to test, not quite making it, but trying to test this past week that 356 level that we have on the chart. This day reaching a high of 349. So that said, since then, it's peeled off, down 2%. This day was actually up almost 5%, and then on Friday coming down 5%. And so if it can regain that 357 area, there's an additional level here for sure. We might as well put it in while we're here just to not lose sight of it. Put that in there at 425.5. So, but these are huge percentage shifts in these areas. So there may be additional, minute or granular levels that get put in there, but it could be quite interesting, if, the short float continues to stay high, or if it is still high. Like I said, this data is a little old from Fintel. And so the question is going to be, is it still this high? If it is, and the fee, that should be from today, if I recall correctly, if they didn't have a delay in their reporting. And so if the fee is this high and the short float is that high, and this starts to get some support at 357, starts moving toward 425, could the components be there for a short squeeze? Yeah, that's the potential that I see. It's very hard to effectuate a short squeeze. I feel like a few years ago, it was getting thrown out there real willy-nilly, that these things were just sort of like popping off all over the place. But these are the components that I look for personally. And so to the degree to which I'm going to, be interested to look at this to see if it's possible, this is what I'm looking at. So it's interesting to me for the moment, but it has to start moving against the shorts, meaning the price has to start climbing in a significant way, because if it's climbing in a significant way and they're paying such a high fee and there's not a ton of additional available shares to borrow, this is how they get cornered, right? And it's the cornering of the short sellers that then gives at least the potential for a short squeeze. So quite interesting to me. Now, if it does continue to dip, that 220 level that we had on the chart held recently, right? It put in a nice curl actually off of that 220. I would be a little concerned if it does come down there again. Do buyers continue to show up in that range? I do worry when a support level has been tapped several times, especially in recent trading days. Are the buyers still there? And if not, does that capitulation to 177 come pretty quickly? That could be the situation if it comes back down to 220, but we'll see how it sort of deals with this current pullback when it couldn't quite reach that 356 level. This was a big day for it, right? Up over 18%. So if it can take that 356, 357 level, 425, 524, 637, and of course, if a short squeeze comes about, that could help it for sure close some of these gaps. This where my cursor is right now, again, there's probably an additional level that's getting sorted out right there on 571, 572. That wouldn't shock me if that's also there. Again, additionally, here around, say, 473 or so, 474, there may be something that develops there. Relatively thin price action to go off of on those, but going off of what we do have, I'm not going to put them on the chart right now because I don't want to clutter it up a ton, but I'll just mention it while we're here in case we don't check back in on GOEV for a while. And of course, if it does come down and it just gets beaten down back below 220, and then it stresses or stretches through that 177, if folks want me to come in and check in on it again, I'm happy to. Again, the only issue that we're going to have there, unless we don't check in on it until there's a bunch of price action that gets put in down here, is we're going to have not a ton to go off of. So we'll see. Now on the think or swim side of things, on this setup, we see a nice motion up out of the channel, came back in, slipped the mid-range of the channel, but held on, nicely to this lower bound of the channel, right? So it didn't have to come all the way down to the lower bound, certainly didn't pop through the lower bound of the channel like we saw over here, and is sort of made quick work on that curl that we were talking about to come back and try to regain support over the mid-range of the channel. So that's where it's at right now, right? That bit of a pullback from that big push over 18% that we talked about. It's coming back to try to settle and test support at the mid-range of the channel. Now, were that to hold right now, the upper bound of the channel is situated at 377, so that may provide some additional resistance if it gets up there. And if it does dip, 224 is that lower mid bound, that grayish line, and then this sort of brighter white line, 173, the lower bound of the channel, may provide some support if it does dip down to those areas. Not so far off from the levels that we have here, right? We have 220, 177. This is 224, 173. So good confluence on the charts there. Just keep in mind this channel is dynamic, so it will shift as additional price action gets put in. Since this previous trigger, fire, another trigger, fire, that pushed it out of the lower bound of the channel. Since then, no retrigger, no refire happening yet. Histogram showing, at least the last couple of days, a bit of a receding of bearish momentum. So a little bit of, dying down on that front. We'll see if that can continue to take shape, especially as it's trying to build support or retest support at the mid-range of the channel. So if it can crush the bearish momentum, gain support at the mid-range of the channel, even if it doesn't sort of immediately push upward, if it even pins itself to the mid-range of the channel and gives itself some time to consolidate there into a range and then triggers while it's pinned to the mid-range of the channel, that could be quite interesting as well. So we'll see what takes shape of all this, if this data even comes into play or not. I'm not going to get too excitable about it yet. Again, I think that these things are often sort of overplayed and people take them a bit too flippantly. And so, I'll see. Again, the most important thing to me is that it starts moving against the shorts from a price perspective, right? So can it climb over 3 and get some motion toward these levels again? If so, then maybe I come back and get a little bit more interested in the potential for these shorts to play a role in future brief price action. All right, folks, I hope that you've had a nice weekend and that you have a good trading week ahead. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.